We're really excited to have Malte, the CTO of Vercel. You guys have probably not heard of Vercel. I'm just kidding. How many people in this room use any of Vercel's products? Okay, there you go. So you guys have not heard of it. Great. It's hard to bucket how I would describe Vercel. It's obviously started as a leading front-end cloud platform, but
I now say we're not a SaaS company.
we're not a SaaS company. Yes, that is true. But I think one of the admirable things about Vercel is they've stayed very true to developers and shipped a lot of very strong AI products, but also been very early to the market to a lot of the new products. So, before we dive deep into your company journey, what's relevant for startups here, maybe how would you describe Vercel's company mission?
One of the funny things about our mission is that when I joined Vercel 4 years ago, it was a very different time. It was pre-ChatGPT, and we were just in this process that sometimes you have in companies where you want to write down your mission. And what we ended up with, it was create at the moment of inspiration. And to be honest, I was not the biggest fan. I was like, this is not true. It takes a while to write the code and push it up and maybe that should be Figma's mission or whatever. Are we a creator company? We're not making YouTube videos. And so we actually eventually kind of got a new one, but I feel now it's super on point, right? That's it's so true now that you can just put in a prompt and get it into production in front of 1 million people. It's just completely true, right? So we have almost essentially arrived at that mission. I think it still makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Vercel has a lot of products. You have obviously the front end, Next.js, you've launched V0, you have security products, CDN products, the AI SDK, Chat SDK products. Give us an insight on how you organize the engineering team across each product, and how does that, maybe tactically, how do you guys set it up, and what are kind of the core principles as you think about teams?
Yeah, I think generally speaking, I think we are a company that's both in a way top down, like our CEO and founder Guillermo, me, we're both people who are very kind of in the weeds. I personally, for example, actually don't manage our engineering team. So I have one report who's my technical assistant, and we together dive deep into topics, and I really kind of try to engage in what I consider to be the teams that are maybe where the impact delta to how good they could be is the largest, right? So we do have this the executive being super in the weeds and understanding what's happening on the ground. But we're also a company where you have this very large swell of bottoms up movement where people try things out and then come to weekly demo days that we have, open signups, 0 rehearsals, 2 to 3 minutes, depending on how many folks sign up. And then very often these things eventually become products. We actually, I think this is the challenge at the moment is to be very disciplined, and the percentage of ideas that go to become your products needs to go down because the ideas that can be presented in a plausible way goes up, right? It's so easy now. So there is quite a bit of curation, but definitely we rely on kind of the creativity of the entire company to guide our strategy.
Yeah. And yeah, you guys seem to experiment a lot, launch products, try it out. You've had a lot of success with some of the newer ones. Are there, in hindsight, maybe products that you guys experimented with, launched and killed, and you felt maybe we shouldn't have done that?
I do think that certainly happens. I think we try to be somewhat disciplined about also having things kind of go into more of a maintenance mode. I think as a company did successful pivot to AI, but also had front-end related projects in flight where we might have decided 3 months later that wasn't worth the investment on a relative basis. Doesn't necessarily mean that this is now something that we regret having, but we probably wouldn't have done it. I think that does happen. But ultimately we do, because everyone does, I think, pay attention. We usually try to chip stuff that is good. We always go through very, very rigorous dogfooding. And so if there's no product market fit internally, we are not going to ship it. And certainly things die at that stage, right? Where people feel very excited about something, but then if no one internally wants to use it, then it's going to die. I think there is a bit of a privilege thing of like the privilege of being a dev tools company is that you're your own customer and you can like evaluate product market fit to some degree yourself in a way that's essentially impossible in almost any other field. But yeah, we heavily take advantage of that privilege.
Yeah, and maybe let's switch gears, to your journey. You were at Google for many years, had a very successful career, and then came to Vercel as CTO. There are a lot of startups here who are much earlier stage, where typically the co-founder is the CTO, and at some point they have to make the decision, hey, we need to bring in an outside-in CTO. I know every company is different, but what mental models do you have on like what's the right time or the right type of company when you should bring an outside-in CTO? What have been your learnings from your journey, maybe some of your peers?
Yeah, I literally texted Guillermo, do you need a CTO? After I hadn't talked to him in half a year or so, because I was like thinking about doing something else. And like, I think this is a good example because I mean, he's he created Next.js. He's as technical as he could be as a CEO. And so he could do without it, right? And so I think it was probably, I think in hindsight, I think it worked out really well for everyone involved. So I think it like, more generally speaking, I think there is this, you will know when there is a time for bringing professional management, but it's worth like delaying it quite a bit. But then at some point you'll have done it. But what I learned actually, I wasn't even like, since I was at Google for such a long time, like when I joined Vercel, we did have these folks who are almost like transients in the sense that they are specialists in bringing companies from, like, for example, in marketing, from stage A to B. And then they will just quit. And it's all good because that's just what they do, and they go to the next earlier stage company. I think those people are incredibly valuable because they just know how to do this. And you need someone else anyway to go from like $10 million revenue to 100 million to $1 billion.
Yep. Have you seen examples with, this is a question a lot of startups ask us. Have you seen examples from your peers who are CTOs at other companies where it's worked, where, startups have hired a CTO at the Series B stage, for example, and really worked, like much earlier than perhaps when you joined?
Yeah, I can't think of too many examples. I think usually, I mean, if you got there, right, like you do have the technical chops. So I'd be very careful with hiring from the outside, unless you have some form of like pre-existing relationship and you just think that this is like, you're extremely sure that this is the right person.
Yep. Got it. Maybe switching gears a little bit towards AI. How does Vercel think about its products today, but also its products 10 years from now to make sure it continues to just catch that AI wave? How do you guys, big picture, think about that?
I think the big opportunity for an infrastructure company like ours is that, in a way, the relationship that people have with software changes. Like it used to be that every line of code was like very considered. Like you might have gone through like a very sophisticated design process. People were very opinionated about the operations part. They needed to like heavily, like they would standardize on operations that they were used to because you don't want to experiment with it. Everything was like extremely, like you were very attached to the code and transitively how it runs in production. And now it's the opposite, right? Like where you just like, you prompted it and maybe you're paying attention, give it a little bit of feedback, but you're essentially, in a way, detaching yourself from the details. So, and I think there's an incredible opportunity for a hosting company, operations company that is made for that moment, right? Where you don't say, okay, there's like 15.6 vCPUs and this AZ and whatever, like all this like details, like how would you even define them if you only half paid attention when the software was written, right? And so I think that's kind of from a big picture, like that's the opportunity we see, that there's going to be more software that needs to be run in a way that we call self-driving, where like it just works. You throw it over the fence and we're going to run it for you in a way that kind of matches the process of how that software was created in the first place.
Yep. We had the Posthog founder here yesterday, and I think they're an example of a developer company that's taken somewhat of a compound startup approach where they've launched a lot of products. Vercel in many ways has a lot of products. You had the core business and you launched a lot of products. To your earlier point, software has become easier and easier to build. Do startups need to think about being, especially developer startups, do developer startups need to be multi-product almost from day one, or be thinking about that from day one?
I think I'm not sure that has changed. Like, we thought we needed to be multi-product, and so we just defined us to be multi-product. But for a while, we were like, okay, we have two products. One is an infrastructure business, and one is a developer experience business. And what if you really looked at the data, it was the same business. Like, there were some customers on this side, but by and large, they were like, there was a lot of overlap, and they were also mutually reinforcing in a way that's good, right? I would say that V0 is truly it's our second product. Like, it has a different funnel, it has different customers, and it kind of has its own P&L in a very independent fashion, and so that's something but it happened very late in our career, right? So obviously there's a whole zoo of different infrastructure primitives and frameworks around them, but ultimately those are all the same product from our point of view, and V0 is a little bit different. One of the ways, by the way, it's different is that it's unequivocally an enterprise business. I'm sure people here signed up. Thank you guys for paying us $20 a month. But V0 has a straight up, sales driven kind of enterprise features, RBAC, that kind of stuff, right? That's what sells it, right? United Health Group, New York Times, those kind of companies are using V0, and that's actually a very different profile from Vercel, where we really are trying to be with you from the earliest days to the $1 billion stage. And we have this completely smooth curve of companies, from the smallest to the largest. And so that really shows how these are actually quite different businesses.
Yeah, I'd love to double click into V0. I remember trying it actually this time last year, and I was very early to it. And at least to me, it felt like the feel the AGI moment in designing, prototyping, and building. And for context, for folks, V0 is Vercel's vibe coding app, as used by thousands of people around the world. I think there's this, you'll have the best view of it. There's this worldview on, hey, you can't build the next Workday, the next Salesforce by just vibe coding your way through it. I actually think you can if you really wanted. And perhaps the people who say that perhaps haven't used the tool in the way they want. But you have this front row seat to people who are using V0. There will be these legacy enterprises that are not going to be using it. But what have you seen some of the frontier users do? What's the most powerful set of things you've seen the frontier users do with V0 today?
Yeah, I mean, you'd be surprised, by the way, with enterprises. But I think one thing that vibe coding is definitely going to disrupt is BI. By the way, there could still be a good BI tool, and then it would still be a great business, but there currently is none. I think they all suck. They all make apps that look horrible, that are very difficult to use. And on the other hand, I think one of the things that we in the very while we discovered is that AIs that are given a database schema and the ability to query that database in an exploratory fashion so that they see the data that comes back are absolutely incredible at visualizing that data. Right? So but the key insight is not just that you describe how you want to visualize, you say, here's roughly what I want to know, and then it queries the data and it's oh, that's what I'm getting. Okay, this is actually the graphs that would be perfect to visualize the actual set of data that I'm getting on the return value. And so I'm very confident that that vibe coding will kind of be how you make dashboards, even if it's further productized, right? You could imagine that you have what really feels like a BI product that is on the back end, essentially a vibe coding tool, right? But that's the thing that I definitely see happening. there's all kinds of other things. Like people are definitely also going into building agents, and essentially just describing their business process and seeing if that works. And that's where I would say currently the frontier that we see in businesses.
Got it. A lot of early stage startups are building application layer companies with a certain focus on go to market. What are some of the things that they should be thinking through to make sure, hey, like 24 months from now, the entire application is not obsolete by an improvement in V0 and the underlying models?
I think the question is like where the value comes from, and I mean this is probably the question of our time. There's ultimately value in understanding businesses, and you can, like I already mentioned, maybe there's a vibe coding tool. Maybe there's a BI tool that's like implementation detail wise, looks like a coding agent underneath, right? And so you could absolutely imagine that you're, I think, able to sell a product that knows how to do an HR process, but has the flexibility of essentially being prompted, right? And if you really look at Harvey, for example, and some of these tools in the legal space, that's really what's going on, right? Like I think there is like, and I see no reason why you would have further like many more fields that have like a similar situation where you have essentially specialized AIs that work really well on some use case, and to me that's what SaaS basically has always been.
Yep, got it. In terms of your AI products, if you're comfortable sharing, what else is on the big picture roadmap for Vercel in the next 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, I think, I mean, the first of all, you have to be humble and you have to be willing to go a little bit with the flow, right? Like I've been saying this for a while, but like it's actually a good example to look at our old space, Next.js web frameworks, right? This is technology that's easy 20 years old. Like everyone you talk to has, multiple generations of websites. Everyone has learned from this. Next.js is 10 years old. Guillermo already had, even though he wasn't was maybe 25 years old, like he had done web development for a long time himself, right? Like it's such a mature space. And agent building is like the absolute opposite. Nobody knows how to do this. Nobody knows whether there will be a better way to discover how to do it in a few months, right? And so that's why I don't think it's the time to go into heavy abstraction. And I think there have been this like first generation of agent frameworks. Don't want to name any names, but they were like, okay, this seems to work. Okay, let's put something super thick on top of this, and then now you have this, and then the paradigm changes, and you're just fighting the abstractions. And so that's why we have been keeping things low level. So with all of that said, I think currently it looks like that every single agent that will be built, certainly for the next year or so, will look like a coding agent, even though it might fill out your mortgage, or figure out when to take your next vacation or write your email. Like all of these agents will be coding agents, right? And so you asked me what it means. It means that we saw that, so that's why we built a sandbox primitive, because the number of customers who need this used to be Anthropic, OpenAI, and maybe Devin, and now it's everyone. Like probably everyone here in the room will have to procure one of those guys. Every company on the planet will have to have a sandbox, like technology that they can run all these agents on.
Yep. Vercel has a lot of small autonomous teams that I'm sure ship fast and operate like a startup. Things are moving extremely fast in AI. Do you think startups should even have a 12-month roadmap, or should it just be 3 to 4 months? Like how have you guys thought about timelines for product roadmap?
Yeah, I'm a believer in having conviction of what you want to do, just being also very willing to throw it out. So at Vercel, over like the time I was there, we've been experimenting with different models, and but we've now, I think we're on the third half year cycle. So we're pretty happy with it. We just went through it again, of basically actually thinking 1 year ahead and thinking what do you think is going to happen, right? Writing it down, and then making like what's effectively a 6 months plan, which we only which we formally revisit after like 3 months. But we also already changed it. So like it's not like it's not written in stone. But I think like if you're not willing to be looking ahead, then I think you're just chickening out from being willing to be wrong sometimes, right? Like it's still better to have an opinion of where things are going and some conviction than just to kind of fully on going with the flow, which I don't think is, yeah. I recommend to have a good eye ahead, like for 6 or 12 months.
Yep. I do have a few more questions, but I also want to open it up to the audience. So any questions from folks?
So curious to ask this question. I think we've been using Vercel, and personally, I've been using Vercel from the days of Zeet. So it used to be called Zeet, and you rebranded to Vercel. So one of the key things we observe is that the pricing model has changed, and everything is like previously we used to come in, there's just $20. Now everything is unit based. And do you see there's a pushback on that? Because that's for sure the dev community sort of like doesn't like a lot of usage based pricing. And certainly our prices have also skyrocketed in the last few months. So curious to hear your thoughts. What was the decision making, and has that something backfired in the dev community?
So I think, Vercel's pricing model has been kind of evolving, but like it's usage based, and it's essentially always been. There's a seat based component. Obviously, there's an interesting discussion whether that makes sense in the future when there's going to be fewer humans and more agents. But ultimately, there's a seat usage based pricing, which makes sense because it scales with hopefully you deriving value from that usage. That said, I think this is, I think, for especially for earlier stage startup, really important. We really believe in moving fast, as you say, Arnav, but you have to be really aware of what the one-day doors are, and those you need to get right. So and pricing changes are one of these things. And I think Vercel is certainly used to be quite bad at this. But we did hire expertise and now I think we're relatively good. Again, it's always going to be the most difficult things because it's difficult to change and you have to get it right from the start, right? So you can never, it's hard to be perfect because you can't iterate on it in the same way as you can iterate on almost anything else. But, and that means that you have to have the expert in place. So we are definitely thinking about, and a lot of feedback if that's attractive, to go more into something that's like a flat rate model. But it has to be ultimately obviously you have to if you're gonna buy 1 million hours of sandboxes, that has to be more expensive than if you buy 1,000, right? I think what I do have empathy with, in the serverless model, people are afraid of kind of runaway builds, and so I think there can be innovation on how to build that where there's both kind of an insurance aspect, and kind of predictability. But I will say, let's say if you have a flat rate that protects you from a spike in months 1, again, nothing can protect you from paying more in the next months, right? Because ultimately you have to pay for the infrastructure, and the infrastructure costs money, right? And I think as long as especially at the high scale, obviously you have to get really professional about buying infrastructure, and we, it's great as a startup to graduate to the point where you can negotiate with your vendors, and we have obviously we have lots of startup customers, and it's all, it's like whenever there's a customer that like where we notice, oh my God, we charging them $100,000 a month on their credit card, like every VC in the room probably would like to know their name, right? Because that is extraordinarily correlated with them being very successful, right? Like it's ultimately a good thing. But
we have some follow-up questions.
Actually, you started to touch on what I wanted to talk about, which is around like abstraction layers and paradigm shifts. And I want to basically pull your brain from inside Vercel, where you are currently like finding yourself caught in between like go with the flow and conviction. What are the paradigms right now that you're sort of keenly watching for shift that you don't quite have the conviction yet to sort of like burn the house down and then completely shift over, but you have like maybe some bit of a gut feeling that, hey, that abstraction layer doesn't quite feel right, and I can but it's yet to be seen what the right one is. Do you have any
I think what you'll see us ship a few things in the hopefully not so far future is to kind of I already mentioned the idea that every agent is a coding agent, and there are now coding agents that have SDKs, but I don't think that they feel right? So I think there's definitely space for what's essentially an SDK to build agents that, again, architecturally look like coding agents, but where the SDK is really meant to be used by agents that are not coding agents, and where there's no baggage from the fact that this thing has to support like a REPL or like a CLI thing, which you probably don't want to have if really you're building like software for like, I don't know, like a lawyer or an accountant or whatever it might be, right? Like, but they're clearly not going to use CLIs. So I think that's certainly there's a lot of space, and this is something we're absolutely investing in.
Hello, I have a question about if we can see in the market where now the coding agent can deploy a fully working code in production. So how do you see the shift from the developer experience shifting from like very user-friendly to developer to be like agent-friendly? For example, like the CLI, the API documentation, should it be more developed? The trend, should it be developed more to be agent-friendly versus like developer-friendly?
Oh yeah, I'm nonstop thinking about that question. If you follow Vercel really closely, we hopefully don't waste your time on. We have substantially shifted how we release features. So, but the good news is that these are not things that are like completely orthogonal and like you have to make choices, right? Especially on the documentation side, there is if it's good for agents, it's good for humans, and the other way around. There are some differences there. Like for example, there's almost no downside to publishing more documentation for agents, while there's totally downside of having like too much documentation for humans. So that there's some stuff there, but like, just because you have an extra article, it's not going to make the humans unhappy immediately. We are now always shipping for everything we do. We always ship the UI, the CLI, the API, and the MCP server, right? And I mean, it's kind of stupid that there's like 3 things for agents, but since no one has one, like it's those 3 things. There's probably also going to be a skill in there as well. So like it's a 4th one, right? So that's certainly the case that what we consider like a successful launch is now something that does address agents as well.
And if I can actually double click on that, I think one of our thesis we think a lot about is, what are the core pieces of infrastructure agents want? Agents need a browser, they need search. And it's a very profound way of thinking about the world because there are going to be far more agents doing the work. there are obviously a lot of infrastructure pieces agents will need, but where do you think concretely a lot of the PMF will come from fundamentally what, if we think about the world on like what are the core infrastructure components agents are going to need? Like where do you think the pull is going to be from in the next 2 or 3 years?
Yeah, I think one thing I want to point to is a blog post that I published on, I think on Tuesday, on architectures for agents, because I think we are still in the early days, and I think almost everyone is doing it wrong, and that wrong is primarily in a security point of view. So if you, let's look at your laptop, right? Everyone's laptop, you're running Cursor or Cloud Code or OpenCode, whatever, right? Literally OpenCode, I think, doesn't even have a sandbox. The other ones do have one, but no one's using it. You have to turn it on, and then most of the things don't work because people turn it back on. So there's no sandbox. Everything's on the same security context. Agent can delete your project, but it can also delete your computer. It can steal all your secrets and email it to, whatever. So it's not good. But I actually don't care about coding agents on your laptop because that's not what I'm doing. Like, it's just like, because everything's derived from there, right? It's the same, right? So like now you say, okay, I'm going to run this coding agent in production because I'm building a mortgage agent, whatever, right? Now, if you do the same architecture, you can, but again, like now your agent harness is going to need a way to talk to the LLM, right? Your agent is going to run the code, and then it's going to that code might need secrets because that code is supposed to talk to the database, right? And so your agent can also now see the database secret, although it actually kind of doesn't actually need it, right? Like it just needed the side effect. So that's sort of the most common way of doing it. And so like literally, I mean, Vercel has a product that does secret injection, so that at least the sandbox itself doesn't need to know the secret. But like that only prevents extraction, but it doesn't prevent misuse, right? So like, let's say you give the LM secrets on the injection layer, like you can still prompt inject the agent to misuse that LM token to steal all your Opus tokens, right? So like it's better than nothing, but it's not good. Now, if you really look at the architecture, the agent harness itself is trusted software, because it's really just normal software that runs as an SDLC, and so it can actually run on like any old backend service on a shared either multi-tenant or like at least kind of multi kind of concurrent requests kind of system. And so yeah, that's the thing. Agent harnesses will run on normal good old Kubernetes or Vercel serverless function type of compute. And so the sandboxes will only be needed for actually running the kind of the actual untrusted code. So that's kind of the pattern that I'm seeing right now, where you have this trifecta of actually running agent harnesses on what looks like relatively traditional compute. We just have to like build the actual frameworks that can run that way. You have the sandboxes for the untrusted part, and then you have the like secret injection as the defense in depth. So to separate kind of the necessary credentials to talk to important systems from the untrusted code.
Got it.
Just a follow up to that is that, now that code is so cheap and basically almost like containers, we want to treat code like cattle. I'm curious if like now it then gives pause to like, I guess the thing that matters is things that are now more durable than the low level or production code itself. So I'm curious if like now not just the test spec that was open source, but like you said, you took a look and you found a bunch of critical vulnerabilities. Like does a software provider then keep those much closer to the chest, since that is essentially, potentially the new declarative language for whether something is actually working the way that it's supposed to?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to claim I have the answer to this. I don't this actually has in no way changed my view of open source. I think the positive messages, and I think that's I think that Vercel actually innovated in the open source business model, and I'll explain the way. And I think this is something that can continue to work, which is that like, again, there's open core. We say, I can be the only one who can run this. And Vercel is kind of the opposite, where we at some point looked at our data and we saw that like so Next.js has this telemetry feature. And so we can track what our market share is. So, and it's probably lower than you think, but the more important thing is it was essentially always constant. And so we figured out that if we make this graph go up more, our share would also go up more, right? And it's actually much easier to grow a truly open source project than some that's encumbered, right? And so if you're willing to take 10% of a very, very large pie instead of 90% of a smaller pie, then you can live extremely freely of saying you can all have this because I'm here, I'm the maker of this. People will always come to me as the most assertive person. And so you will have a good business model.
Rajan?
Yeah. I had a question. A lot of AI companies that range from the model companies to application layer companies, we obviously don't know about Vercel, but, either run at very low gross margins or like negative gross margins. As you guys think about the next 5-10 years and how things are going to play out, how does this movie play out? Because, it's kind of hard to have like $100 billion company that has no gross margin. Yeah. So would love to get your thoughts on like, as you guys think about the future and not for Vercel, but as you look at sort of what's going on around, I'd love to kind of get your thoughts.
Yeah, and part of that gross margin, by the way, is kind of how you do accounting. And
by the way, there's only one way to do gross margin accounting.
Right. Well,
I mean, really, there's one gap way to do gross margin accounting.
That's okay. I'll tell you what I think is important though, because it depends ultimately on the role of how you account for intelligence, and I think it's actually fundamentally important. Like, if you, let's say you have $100 million revenue, but you paid $120 million to Anthropic. Okay, now you have a negative margin, right? Okay, maybe you improve it, and now you pay, you have $100 million revenue, and you pay $90 million to Anthropic. Is that like, do you consider that at like 10% margin, or do you kind of accept that just like previously your customer had to pay for electricity to use your product, the intelligence essentially becomes this kind of thing that, it flows through, and maybe your customer brings their own key, or maybe they sign in with OpenAI, or maybe you technically sell it to them, but ultimately that's just kind of how it goes. And your value add was always only going to be that 10 million, and you convince your VC that they have to like get off their old Salesforce driven numbers, and you're saying, I'm doing the $10 million, and you either like them or you don't, but that's what it's going to be, right? So I think that's a conversation that has to be had, and it's a possibility that's how it's going to be. It could also be that the opposite happens, and we're in this timeline, which is not even that unlikely, that we have these like model labs that are, going tit for tat on the capabilities. All of you can always switch from Anthropic to Google to OpenAI and back. You can go to them and say, well, I got a better deal over there. What can we do? And so eventually, and Google eventually says, well, actually, I'm selling advertising, and I have this side business, and I can sell it at cost, and my cost is the lowest, and tokens are just going to be cheap, and everything is exactly the same how it used to be 10 years ago, right? Like that's also a possible future. We don't know that, but I think we're definitely preparing for a place where, in a way, you have these like separate books, and the honest thing is to say very clearly, here's my value add, and either that's a good business or it's not a good business.
Thank you.
Cool. Last couple of questions from my end. I think maybe related to what Rajan has said. Historically, a lot of infrastructure products were harder to build and sticky. I used to work at Cisco and App Dynamics, and we felt App Dynamics was very sticky, and Vercel core infrastructure very sticky. That's clearly somewhat changing, where startups are growing much faster, but it feels like revenue is not as durable anymore, especially for developer tools. Should we expect startups to just keep growing faster and just accept the fact that revenue is probably not going to be as durable anymore? Or is that like a question that board VCs keep asking and we're overthinking it?
I think it's very related to what I was just saying, right? Like as long as you are, like, certainly what we've been seeing is that you are in a dynamic that's somewhat similar to the Uber and Lyft one, like a few years ago, where like you can easily pump your numbers by selling tokens for cheaper, right? And you're also seeing that there's at least some segment of the developer base who are extremely willing to kind of go with the flow to wherever the tokens are the cheapest. But clearly that's not sustainable. Like you guys have probably a better view of overall the industry, but I don't think I'm seeing like any change in developers moving around more if you control for this effect, right? That the developers are chasing the tokens.
I want to talk about hiring really quickly. With AI, do you have fundamentally very different hiring practices for engineers? Because I think that those tactical lessons are very useful for a lot of our companies here.
On the hiring side, yeah, it's certainly evolving, right? We do now 2 types of interviews. We both interview where we don't allow people to use AI, and then we do interviews where we require them to use AI, right? And if you require someone to use AI, you're looking at how they do that rather than whether they find the solution, right? Because most likely, it's one that's possible to find using the tools, and so I think that's a good thing, right? You want to know. I think you certainly still want people who are able to do it without the AI, because you just still have to at least judge what's going on, right? And then but they also have to use AI because otherwise they're just not competitive in terms of output, right? So you need to go for both. I think we continue to have an extremely successful internship program. So I'm very bullish about hiring kind of very junior people who kind of grew up with this tech over. But it doesn't actually mean that I don't hire the more senior ones, but I certainly I actually am more inclined now to hire junior folks than I might have been a couple of years ago.
And last question, I think you've repeatedly said this, which is a very profound statement, which is every agent is a coding agent, and Vercel's right in the center of that in terms of the products, the types of companies you serve. You're going to be launching a lot of products over the next 10 years. Fast forward 10 years, like what do you hope the kind of the utopian Vercel product looks like?
Wow. 10 years, like...
Oh, pick 3 years, 4 years, but a sufficiently long time.
It's so far away. Yeah. I definitely, maybe this is short. I still want to see at scale professional agent development. Like right now, there's obviously the startups, which are like very active and that's going well. And then you have the like N8N type of thing, which is like very, very ad hoc little life cycle. And I do, like more the startups than the ad hoc stuff, but like the $1 trillion opportunity, which is that you automate just some very large percentage of like knowledge work, is like we haven't essentially discovered how to do that yet, right? Like, I don't think it's not going on. Like people are still kind of in the very early days. So I just want to be the place where like all those apps run eventually, or all these agents run eventually.
Yep. Thank you, Malte. Thank you for coming, and thank you for building Vercel. I think you literally power a lot of developer companies and companies around the world. So thanks for working on it and coming here.
Thanks for having me. Great questions.
Thank you.